Hey friends, I am so excited to finally be able to introduce you to our newest family member. This is Luke Rodney. He was born on January 11th. It was a Thursday at 6:03 p.m. and we are so happy that he is here. My other kids and dad are on the mountain today, except for my 5-year-old who is here. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to sit down and tell you his birth story. I personally love hearing other people's birth stories. I'm kind of a birth story junkie, but I also am hoping that his story will encourage anybody who is going into a birth where they feel like it's not going how they had imagined. Maybe they're ending up at a hospital when they had planned to have a home birth, or they're ending up with an induction like I did, despite them wanting to go into labor naturally. So hopefully this can be an encouragement.
If you're new here, I'm Stacy, homeschooling and homesteading mama of 7, on a mission to ditch the grocery store and become more self-sufficient. Subscribe to our channel to learn more about our journey and how we are making that dream come true.
I don't even know where to start. I guess I feels like I should start with before Christmas when I was in prodromal labor, which is basically labor that doesn't progress. So the contractions were intense and they were frequent, but they didn't change my cervix enough to be considered active labor. So this went on for weeks. I had a hard time sleeping, and when I would go in for my appointment, my cervix did change a little bit, but still not enough to be in active labor. I had really wanted this time to go into spontaneous labor. I've been induced with all of my other babies, including my first where my water broke, and then even the next day after my water broke, I still hadn't gone into labor, and so my midwife sent me in for an induction. With only one of my babies did I go into the hospital on my own, and I don't think they actually would have kept me, except for that they couldn't find my baby's heart rate, which was very scary, of course, and so they broke my water to put an internal electrode on her head. And of course, as soon as they did that, they said everything was fine. But at that point, they had gotten the ball rolling, so they did have to give me Pitocin to continue the labor from there. So basically, every time I've been induced. With this pregnancy, from the very beginning, I had decided I did not want to be induced. And I did everything I could to make that become my reality. However, when I got to 40 weeks, there were some underlying health conditions that just made me feel like induction was once again the best decision for everybody. So I went ahead with the induction. If you saw my last video, you know I wasn't really excited about the idea. However, it was at that point the best decision for us. I went in for the induction on January 11th. We had to be there at 7:30. I got up at 5:30 so that I could try to walk on the treadmill and get things going, hopefully before my induction time at 7:30. So I cried in the shower that morning. I just wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But now looking at everything and how it went, I know that that was the best plan for both of us. The day of his induction, we got to the hospital about 7:30 in the morning, and it ended up taking 2 hours, 4 nurses, and an anesthesiologist to get my IV in. This was really eye-opening to me because one of the things I wanted was to not have an IV in while I was laboring. And I knew that if I went into spontaneous labor, I could get to the hospital and turn down the IV, and that would be fine. Now looking at how everything played out, I am so glad that I got the IV because I ended up hemorrhaging and I needed medication through the IV. And it took 2 hours to get it in. And even after the anesthesiologist did get my IV in, when they started running Pitocin through it, it blew. So they had to fix it. So now looking at it, I'm really glad that the IV was in for all of that emergency medication that I ended up needing. Okay, so we got the IV in. I have notes over here because I know that if I didn't write things down during the labor, I would forget the details. But about noon, they started giving me Pitocin through my IV. I had opted for Pitocin. At first, I thought I would just have them break my water, but I was a little bit concerned because his head was not engaged and I knew I had a lot of amniotic fluid. So one of the risks with that is the cord prolapsing, so coming first before the head, which is an emergency situation and an automatic C-section. So I didn't want to go that route. So I opted to have a little bit of Pitocin to get the contractions going enough to bring his head down further. And that ended up working wonderfully. We put Pitocin at 2, I don't know if it's milliliters or what the units are, but 2 units, so a very low dose, and it got contractions going immediately, and they were consistent but not at all painful. So from noon to about 2:30, we just hung out, my husband and I. We both worked on our laptops. It was really relaxing. The nurses would come in and say, "How's it going?" And my response was always, "It's going really well, but I'm not uncomfortable, so I'm not sure that this is doing anything." And my concern was that we were going to be there for days trying to get this induction going. So they would check me every once in a while. I'll have to look at my notes here. I kept notes during the birth because I knew I wouldn't remember all of these details later after everything. So looks like, okay, so noon Pitocin was started. At 2:30 I was checked and I had gotten to a 5, and we decided to break my water to get things going. Contractions were still very manageable. So breaking my water definitely increased the intensity, and it did move things along, but it still wasn't painful at all. And I did in fact have so much amniotic fluid. It was impressive. So then about 3:30 or 4, the doctor came in, and it was at this point that I felt like I could no longer work or multitask. I needed to just focus in on this labor. The intensity had increased. It still wasn't painful at all. It was just something I needed to focus on. So I put my computer away. She checked me at this point. Let's see, at 4:30 she checked me and I was at a 6. I told her it was intense, but I still felt good, no pain. Then it was about 5 o'clock, it looks like, when I started to feel like I needed to start breathing through the contractions, and I started to feel some pain along with the intensity. And I knew that that just meant I needed to relax more, which I have a really hard time doing at the end of my labors. So I really focused in on relaxing. I laid on my side, which was the most comfortable thing for me at that point. And then about 5:15, 5:30, my husband started doing hip compressions. Hip squeezes are amazing in labor. If you are looking for a coping mechanism for pain during labor, you need to learn the hip squeezes. A doula can do it, or your nurse, or your husband, or whoever. But basically, it's just pushing on your hips, low down on your hips during the peak of the contraction. And a lot of the time, this would take away all of the pain. It was amazing. So this continued until about 5:40, and then I felt like I needed a new coping mechanism. The pain had increased with the intensity, and I was starting to lose control. I was starting to become less calm. I couldn't relax through the contractions. So I asked to get in the tub. And in hindsight, probably everyone in that room knew that that would never happen because I was clearly, with my vocalization and how I was acting through the contractions, they could tell I was getting close. So they did start the bathtub. They turned off the Pitocin at this point. They asked me when I wanted to turn it off, and I didn't want to turn it off earlier because I was nervous that things would stop or slow down. Now looking back, I wish I would have turned it off a little bit sooner, because I do think that the Pitocin made it hard to stay calm and stay focused through those contractions, just because they're so much more intense. So we turned off the Pitocin. I could hear the bath water going, which actually was really helpful, even though I never made it into the bath, because it kind of gave me like a light at the end of the tunnel, something to focus in on and think, okay, as soon as I get in the bath, I'm gonna get some relief. I can get through this. So I was just focusing in on getting through the contractions while the bath filled. Then about 5:45, I said I had to go to the bathroom, and I wasn't sure if I would make it into the bath. I did kind of jokingly ask my doctor if she would do a water birth. Granted, this jacuzzi tub that they have is pretty small. And she said, "We deliver babies wherever they come. However, keep in mind that if there's any complications or we need to do a maneuver to help baby out or anything, you would have to get out of the tub, which could be very uncomfortable." So I wasn't sure if I was going to get in the bath at this point, but figured I need to go to the bathroom, so I'll start there. I went and sat on the toilet and had a contraction, and it was very intense. I went to stand up after going to the bathroom, and I just remember saying, there's no way I'm making it back to that bed. This baby is coming. And I think my husband pretty much picked me up and carried me to the bed. I don't really remember how I got there, but I got back. They asked me how I wanted to labor, what position I wanted to be in, and surprisingly, I told them I wanted to be on my back, which is kind of funny to me because I know a lot of the time we hear laboring on your back is like the worst position for a baby to come down. And really, I had tried hands and knees, and I had tried on my side, and my back was just what was most comfortable. So I laid on my back, and at this point, my doctor told me that I was complete. I had been at a 7 before I went to the bathroom, and 7 or 8. And then by the time I got back, I was complete. So she told me I could push whenever I wanted. And I kind of wish she wouldn't have said anything, because that kind of gave me this mental, like, okay, I can get this over with now if I just push, which I really shouldn't have been pushing yet, because I wasn't getting that fetal ejection reflex going where that feeling comes like you have to push. There's no other option. And I wasn't there yet. So I pushed, even though I probably shouldn't yet, even though I was complete. And unfortunately, I wasn't really paying attention to my contractions at this point either. So apparently what happened was that a contraction came, I pushed, and then the contraction stopped. And so little man, not so little man, got a little bit stuck. So at that point, what they had me do is called the McRoberts maneuver, I believe. So they had me put my legs all the way up and then pushed down, I believe, on my pubic bone to help open things up. And he was able to make it all the way through at that point. I think she did have to help a little bit because that contraction had stopped. So with a little help from my doctor, he was born at 6:03. It was a wild and very fast and furious end to my labor after it being so comfortable most of the way through. But I was glad that it went quickly and it went smoothly, other than I did hemorrhage after he was born. So immediately after he was delivered, my placenta came at the same time and I bled. In her notes, she said briskly after the delivery. So she did give me every medication out there for a hemorrhage. I was pumped full through the IV. I was given a shot in my arm, in my leg. And thankfully, with the combination of the medications and some fundal massage, she was able to stop the hemorrhage. And I didn't lose a ton of blood. I think it was mostly just alarming how much had come right at the beginning. And so she was proactive about it, which I'm very grateful for. The medicines, actually, they made me feel really sick right away. I didn't get sick or anything, but it just made me feel nauseous and like I wasn't quite up to holding him. So my husband took him for a few minutes, but I would say those medications wore off in about 20 minutes. And then I was fine and very grateful that they had done their job. So that all went well. Yes, I would have preferred to not hemorrhage, but I was glad with how everything turned out. So then I was able to nurse him and he was very calm right after birth. I don't think he hardly cried. He made a couple noises to let us know that he was here and healthy. And other than that, he had no crying. He nursed right away, so that was really nice. Overall, this birth was amazing. It went so well. And the thing that I want to point out the most, especially for those who are going into a hospital birth and nervous about it, is that I was able to have an induction in a hospital with a traditional doctor and still feel so empowered and so in control of my labor and birth experience. It was amazing. They always came to me and asked what I wanted. They didn't bat an eye when I denied certain things for him or for me. They always asked what my preference was as far as every step of the induction, whether I wanted Pitocin, if I wanted my water broke, when I wanted these things to happen. I just felt like it was a really empowering experience and a really good birth experience, especially for being in a hospital where it kind of has a bad rap of them just kind of taking over the experience. I didn't feel that at all. I definitely felt very in control of the whole situation from start to finish. So if you are having a hospital birth and nervous about it, or if you're getting induced and nervous about it, First of all, make sure you have a provider that you trust, that you know will allow you to take the reins. But the second part of that is also to know that you have control over it ultimately. No one can make you do anything. They can't force a decision on you. So you really need to go in with a birth plan in hand, knowing what you want from the beginning so that you can say, yes, I want this, no, I want that. And they need to listen because that is your hospital rights. And if they tell you otherwise, you need to ask for the charge nurse and ask to see the patient rights for the hospital, because you should always feel this way no matter what hospital you're delivering in with whatever provider you're delivering with. So I am overall so happy with this birth. I'm so happy that we went through the induction process. I had zero pain up until transition, even with Pitocin. So don't let people tell you that Pitocin is gonna kill your whole labor. I think it did make transition more intense for sure, but because that part was pretty short, it was completely manageable. And even having my water broke didn't make things uncomfortable any more than they were before that. I hope you enjoyed listening to our birth story. I hope that this can be an encouragement for you if you have an upcoming birth, or maybe you just enjoyed listening to it. And we will see you here next week. Your little noises. Yeah, you smile for the camera. You smile for the camera. That's not a smile. Oh, that's